I'm so excited, I can't hardly wait to hear what I'm about to say. A while back I saw a movie, had this old country guy walking down the side of the road stiff-legged with his hands run down in his overall pockets. Guy comes idling up next to him in this really cool 55 Ford pickup truck. Hollers out the window, "Where you headed?" He doesn't break stride, doesn't even look up. He says, "In the direction I'm walking." That's so simple, it's genius. Andy Stanley says our destination is determined by our direction, not our intention. But we need to be real careful when we look back at our heroes. Because if we're not real careful, we can start thinking that they were somehow special, that maybe they were better than us, or braver than us, or bolder than us, and that we could never do what they did. This wasn't 5 guys in the back of a subdivision writing a letter to the homeowners association to keep the pool open for an hour later on Saturday night. These guys were committing high treason against the King of England, and to get caught meant certain death for them and their families. But they were willing to risk everything just for a chance at the kind of freedom that you've enjoyed your whole life. Wouldn't that be a cool way to live? I may go down in flames, but I'm not going to sit by and do nothing. I may be facing bankruptcy, but I will not die with a bullet in my back. My marriage may be in trouble, but I will not die with a bullet in my back. I might get cancer, but I will not die with a bullet in my back. This couldn't be the same soldiers. They must have been reinforced. A beaten regiment doesn't charge. Somebody facing bankruptcy doesn't charge. Somebody facing divorce doesn't charge. Somebody with cancer wouldn't charge, but they did charge.
I am so left-brained, my head tilts. And she smiled at me, and it was more like a smirk. It's kind of like, you know, when a little kid says something that's so naive and immature, it's just adorable, and you want to laugh at them, but you don't want to hurt their feelings? It was one of those kind of smiles.
He was so humiliated he quit, left the military and went home. But 6 months later he re-enlisted, just for the chance to serve with the legendary General Edward Braddock and the British regulars. But it was just hours earlier that day that his service with Braddock had ended in disaster. He stood there looking at the fire, and he just kept replaying the day over and over in his mind. His throat and his eyes were still burning from the smoke of the musket fire. He still had that smell of blood and death in his nose, and when he closed his eyes, he could see the sun flash off the Indians' knives as they scalped the dead and the dying. He and the general were moving up to a river earlier that morning with about 1,500 men, and they were surprised by only about 300 French and Indians. The woods exploded with musket fire and the war cries of the Indians, but they outnumbered them 5-1. It should have been an easy victory, but they got slaughtered. The general had made them fight in formation, shoulder to shoulder, like they did in the fields of Europe. They weren't prepared for an enemy they couldn't see, shooting at them from behind the trees. The fighting had gone on for hours. His horse was snorting and stomping the ground and flinched every time a cannon was fired. Actually, it wasn't even his horse. His horse had been shot out from under him earlier in the fight. But he rode this horse back and forth in the battle, trying to rally the men and maintain some kind of order in the chaos. He never even heard the next musket ball coming. But he knew that sound when it hit. And he felt his horse buckle and go down under him. And he looked around for another horse and ran over and pried the reins from the hand of a dead lieutenant. And as he mounted his third horse, he got the news. General Braddock had been shot, and the men had panicked and broken rank. He gathered his reins up in his fist, lifted his sword in the air, dug in with his spurs. Nearly 1,000 of his men were dead or wounded. Only 21 of the French and Indians had even been hurt. He was 23 years old. He had no military authority in this battle, but riding back and forth, he was able to organize a retreat and pull back with the general and the wounded. But he'd suffered another humiliating defeat. He stood there thinking about all this, and as he did, he shifted around the fire to stay out of the smoke. And when he did, one of the officers sitting behind him caught a flash of light through his coat. It was Lieutenant Colonel Charles Lee, one of the British regulars that had come over from Ireland with Braddock. He said, "Sir, you seem to have a hole in your coat." He looks down. sticks his finger out through the hole. It was from a .75 caliber French musket ball. Lee said, "Who are you?" He just ignored him, took his coat off, held it up to the fire, and found 3 more bullet holes. Lee asked him louder this time, loud enough where everybody turned to look. He said, "Who are you?" This 23-year-old kid turns and looks Lee square in the eye. He said, "My name is George Washington." Lee said, "Pardon me, sir, I know your name. That's not what I was asking."